Walt Disney World was a huge part of my childhood and is as nostalgic a subject as you could imagine for me. We would go almost every year before economic and family issues started to slow that down considerably. Nonetheless, it's still a place that I love going to when I can. Something else of note is that when I was little, I didn't have much in the way of video games, and it wouldn't be until the 6th generation when I'd get a Game Boy Advance and GameCube. However, before that happened, I would find myself playing video games at friends' houses and while visiting relatives. When visiting one of those friends around 16 years ago, he showed me a kart racer on PlayStation taking place in Disney World, featuring racetracks based on the rides in the park. I only played it that one time, but it lingered in my mind for a while. So earlier this year, when I stumbled across the Dreamcast version of this game at a retro game shop for only a couple of dollars, I bought it without much hesitation, while also not really expecting too much aside from nostalgic novelty. So just how well does this game capture the Walt Disney World experience? Well, there's only one way to really do this right. On location! The first thing I should address about this game is the genre itself, and its relation to the subject material. At first it sounds like a really random choice, but actually upon further thought, it's actually pretty clever. You see, these rides have a loading area, move along a track, and make their way back to the loading area. And this cycle repeats throughout the park's operation hours. So you could have the loading area as the start and finish line and adapt the ride track into a racetrack. Clearly, this was something that the developers understood and tried to pursue. How well the game fully realizes this is something we will go into later. The presentation is largely what you'd expect of a Dreamcast port of a PlayStation game. The resolution is higher, but the models haven't changed from their 5th gen counterparts. Thankfully, the textures are pretty smooth, but unfortunately there are some substantial frame rate drops every now and then, which actually kind of surprises me. Moving on, the music is actually taken from the attractions themselves, either from the queue area or the ride sections, which is a really nice touch and really helps aid the authenticity. However, there are exceptions to this. Okay, I'm confused. Is this supposed to be the scary dinosaur ride, or is it tail time? Yes, for those wondering, this was developed by Crystal Dynamics, the same people who made the Gex games. So for whatever music they couldn't get from the rides, they got from their other games. On one hand, as a fan of the Disney parks, I find this a little odd, but on the other hand, I can't say I'm against the prospect of PlayStation music in Disney World. So the plot to this game, and yes, this game actually has one, is that Chip 'n Dale broke the fireworks machine, so in order for the fireworks show to go on, you must get the pieces through racing throughout Disney World. I honestly find the correlation of those things pretty loose, but it's simple, fits the game's tone, and is appropriate to the subject material, so I really can't complain too much. As far as controls go, there really isn't a whole lot to talk about. They're well done, and the game is very playable. They're not the best kart racing controls I've ever seen, but they're very good by 5th gen standards. Now for the racetracks. For the Magic Kingdom, we have Big Thunder Mountain, the Haunted Mansion, Jungle Cruise, Pirates of the Caribbean, Space Mountain, Tomorrowland Speedway, and the final unlockable stage, Splash Mountain. In Epcot, there's Test Track. And that's it. In MGM Studios, yeah, remember it was called that, we have Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith without the Aerosmith because licensing fees. Additionally, we also have a general park area to collect the coin minigame. In Animal Kingdom, we have Dinosaur. And that's it. Then finally, we have a racetrack based off of Blizzard Beach and a collect the coin minigame for Typhoon Lagoon. You might have noticed one of my main gripes with this game. For a game called Walt Disney World Magical Racing Tour, we don't really get to see much of Walt Disney World outside of one park of 4. You could have done Kilimanjaro Safaris. Not to mention Cali River Rapids. They could have done Body Wars. Super Ultra Goddammit Deluxe on toast. They could have done Maelstrom. In fact, you know what? Let's check it out right now. No, this can't be happening! I have no problem with the number of Magic Kingdom courses. I just wish there were more for some of the other parks, though to a degree I do understand. Epcot was much more education-focused at the time, though that was starting to turn around at this point. MGM Studios' big draws were largely based off of movies not owned by Disney at the time, like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, which would have likely meant that Crystal Dynamics would have to pay more licensing fees. That and Animal Kingdom just opened and barely had anything in it due to cost cutting. An entire third of the park's theme, the section that was going to have Animal Kingdom's big signature attraction, was scrapped. But the fact that the game is leaving me asking for more illustrates that I had a pretty good time with what was present. The accuracy of ride recreation has a bit of range. You get things like Big Thunder Mountain, which really just play around with the theme, but then you get tracks that are outstandingly faithful. The Haunted Mansion track even includes the line and queue area into the track. Even ones like Pirates of the Caribbean, which find more of a middle ground, recreate a lot of the set pieces of the ride with exceptional attention to detail, and that's the key term. Even if you've never been to a Disney park, the sheer attention to detail in the tracks is hard not to appreciate, and it managed to serve both as fan service and what helps the game hold its own. However, the game, while feeling polished from a programming standpoint, feels pretty rushed in a few areas, and it takes what could have been a surprisingly great game into a game that, while still better than what most people would initially expect, is only that by so much. As to why, I'll start with the more superficial and then get to the bigger issues, none of which are too major, nor do I feel these destroy the game or anything of the sort, but I do feel the need to address them. I just mentioned the lack of non-Magic Kingdom Disney rides in comparison to the ride choices from that park, but even some of the other rides that were picked end up being less from what they could have been. Most notably, Test Track. Of all the rides I could think of that would work for this game, this is it. It has the potential for a very fun track design and theming, but also environmental hazards and whatnot. It's a perfect fit. I can't wait to race through this. Collect the coins! There are no words to describe just how disappointed I am. However, there are also things that are more gameplay oriented. The first being the track order really baffles me, as well as the difficulty curve. Well, actually, there is no difficulty curve. It's just all over the place. For instance, before you can get to an incredibly easy stage, ideal for the player to get used to the controls and mechanics like Tomorrowland Speedway, you have to beat a stage like the Haunted Mansion, which has a lot of twists, turns, practically blind perpendicular angles and 180-degree turns, and requires a lot of track memorization. The game never really gets too hard, not even close to things like F-Zero GX or Fast Racing Neo, but the order in which you play these just did not make sense to me at all. Then there's the issue of the stages having so many blind turns and whatnot that it can be kind of disorienting. It becomes ridiculously easy to miss turns because you just couldn't see them. I don't mind this sort of thing for secrets, and yes, the game does that too, but I feel that this game just goes way overboard with this. But overall, the game is pretty decent. Probably better than what most people would suspect. However, it's also a bizarre case of a game that, based on the concept alone, sounds like a cheap cash grab upon initial glance, before sounding like something with a lot more potential upon further thought. The game ends up proving the latter is the case, and ends up being an entertaining enough game, but ends up feeling a bit rushed and inconsistent in the quality of its execution. In the end, it's a fairly entertaining kart racer, and if you're a fan of the resort and have some level of intrigue, then you'd probably be satisfied in one way or another.